Hey up Leeds, and a happy new year to you all. I had a fantastic time chatting to Paul Thomas, who is of the Leeds Salon, which is a public discussion forum that was founded in February 2009. The Salon organises discussions around political, cultural and scientific issues with the aim of challenging any orthodoxies along the way, defending and developing the legacy of the Enlightenment, and above all, providing a space where free speech can take place. I think you'll find this chat very interesting. I certainly enjoyed it myself. Have a listen. On this episode of Light on Leeds podcast, I have Paul Thomas, who's remoted correctly to speak to me to tell me about Leeds Salon. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Hazel.
Thank you very much for joining. I know you're not feeling the best at the minute, so I appreciate it.
That's okay.
So, Paul, can you tell me about Leeds Salon? How did it start? Have you always been involved in it? And what is it?
Leeds Salon is a public discussion forum, and the idea is that we debate anything and everything, science, politics, culture, with the aim of challenging any orthodoxies along the way. We lately have kind of retwigged the what it's about section to say we're a safe space for free speech, which kind of takes the P slightly out of the notions of safe spaces, which are usually safe spaces from free speech, but we're about a safe space for free speech.
And you started in, I see that it was founded anyway, in February 2009. Have you always been part of it?
Yeah, there was me and another bloke called Michaela. We started it together, and he dropped out after some years to pursue a PhD. So since then, I've ran it with other people who've bobbed in and out to help me out running events.
So it's quite a long time to have been doing all this kind of thing by yourself. It must take quite a bit of your spare time, does it?
It does. It does in intensive periods, and then once you've got everything in place, then it's up and running. It's getting speakers and agreeing a venue, agreeing a time. All that is kind of minor admin work. So sometimes everything comes together quick and easy, and sometimes it takes ages to get events in place.
And so what kind of venues do you travel around? You don't have a specific venue that you do the forums in?
Well, we've used lots of different venues in Leeds, but generally our main home is the Carriage Works. But we've used the Tetley a lot over the years. We used to use Leeds Civic Hall until we got too big for that. We've used several other places in Leeds, and we're always on the lookout for somewhere new to use. The very first one we ever did was actually at Waterstones, and then we did one at Boor's bookshop when that existed, and we've used Blackwell's, who we're affiliates of anyway, so we're on their affiliate scheme, and Blackwell's get books for us for events. So we're happy to move around, because if you move around, you can tap into slightly different and newer audiences.
Yeah, of course. And how does it work? Do people have to sign up so you've got an idea of how many people will be attending?
They don't have to sign up. We ask them to let us know if they're coming along. So we've got a mailing list of about 800, and it goes out to that, and people will respond to that and say, I intend to come to the next salon or whatever. And then we publicise on Facebook and Twitter and on Meetup. There's a Meetup group called Escape Leeds, and we advertise it on there. So you get a bit of people, hitting the join button on Facebook or on Meetup. So we tend to have an idea that's usually within about, 5 to 10 people of how many, what kind of size audience we're going to get, which is just technically so we know how many chairs to put out and we know what size room to book, really.
Yeah, of course. And do you get completely different audiences depending on what the talk is about, or do you have sort of a hardcore following who will turn up to anything?
I think we've got a very, very small hardcore following. I think half of our audience will be semi-regulars. A very small number of people, maybe half a dozen, are regulars. But depending on the event, you can get a vastly different audience. So when we did one, for instance, on quantum theory at Blackwell's, we got a completely different audience. Very few that I recognise from previous salons. When we did one on, there was a solicitor who had a book out on the idea of rape culture, and we had loads of kind of the feminist society and feminist academics from Leeds Uni. There again, it was almost a completely different audience to usual. So it depends on the subject. So you can get a vastly different audience depending on the topic.
Yeah, of course. I bet it's fascinating to see who turns up for each thing.
It is. Like I say, you get semi-regulars who you'll see for at least 2 or 3 events a year, and then other people you'll see once in a blue moon, and other people you see once and then never again.
And so, how do you decide, Paul? How do you sort of do your research? Do you are the sort of places that you follow? How do you come up with topics and new ideas?
Some of them are suggested to us. For instance, last January, just before lockdown, we had a teacher at Bradford Grammar School who writes his own blog, and he suggested one to us, and we just went along with it, and it worked. Often it's things in the news. People have books out. I see things that other discussion fora do in Leeds or around the country, and we just repeat it. So there's salons in other cities and other places. So as well as other discussion fora like the Café Scientifique and everything else.
Yeah.
So I get just the ideas from wherever, really.
So you must be one really clever person now, Paul, after listening to all of these discussions on all these various topics.
No, it's not like that. It's like when you're studying for an exam or a particular essay, and as soon as you've got it in and out the way, you can't even remember what it is. I mean, that's obviously you do retain knowledge in a kind of, pub quizzy type way. You pluck things out the air, but it's you kind of read intensely for a particular salon, but a lot of it goes out the wall. I mean, when we started the salon for 18 months before then, we'd been running a book group, and we used to meet at a pub in Leeds, and it used to be between about 4 and 8 people.
Mm-hmm.
And what we'd do is we'd take a contemporary piece of political literature, like a new book that had come out, a history of this or, philosophy of that or whatever, and we'd read it and discuss it. And the reason we did that is because we used to read books on our own. And when you read a book and somebody say, what are you reading a book on? Mm-hmm. I say, I'm reading a book on, I don't know, quantum theory in the pub. And somebody says, well, what's that about? You're like, do you know what? I can't remember. And so we used to start the book club to try and educate ourselves better so we'd remember some of that stuff. But even when you study things quite intensely, as soon as you walk away from it, most of it just disappears into the ether.
I'm really glad that you said that, because it made me feel a little bit better now, because I read a lot, sort of fiction and non-fiction, and quite often somebody will say to me, oh, you lent me that book, it was brilliant, and do you remember this bit? And I tend to go away from reading books with a feeling rather than remembering everything that happened in the book.
Yep.
So yeah, it made me feel better, so thanks for that, Paul.
No, I think everybody's like that. I think unless you're a scholar, that's the way knowledge is. I mean, I know people who have incredible memories and they just bring everything up, and they can read a book and they can go through all the arguments, whereas I just remember 1 or 2 things, you know what I mean? So I think some people are kind of intellectuals in that way, and the rest of us just kind of aspire to that, and that's fine to aspire to. You don't have to remember everything. It's not the end of the world. No, I mean, even public discussion forum, it's a serious endeavour, but it is meant to be fun at the end of the day. It is meant to be, socially entertaining and stuff. It's not meant to be like an exam.
Yeah, exactly. And so the word salon, it sort of conjures up for me, they used to have sort of salons back in the past, and and I saw on your website that you refer to salons coming about in the age of Enlightenment. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, the salons were really, they were an aristocratic thing during the Enlightenment. They had existed before, even going back to ancient Greek times. They may have referred to discussions as salons. I mean, salon just means room in French, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Or people may retrospectively put the term salon back into ancient times. I think certainly from the Renaissance, there was salons in Italy, maybe I might be wrong. But obviously, the Salon is associated with the Enlightenment more than anything else. The French Enlightenment more than anything else, even though there was salons in this country, including up until the end of the 19th century, the Pankhursts used to run their own salon in Manchester. And in fact, there was... and I think even Eleanor Marx, Karl Marx's daughter, spoke at one of the Pankhurst salons in like the 1860s and
Yeah, I think
things.
she did. I read about her. Yeah.
So, but in France, I mean, they rose during the Enlightenment. They were run by often aristocratic women more than anything else, because they obviously women were kind of kept out of education. Even the aristocracy, to an extent, they had an education, but they didn't have what the fellas had, and they set up their own salons where they would invite leading thinkers, Voltaire and scientists and all this kind of stuff along to discuss those ideas. So it's a very aristocratic thing. During the revolution, it did become a bit of a street thing. So in bars and cafes in France, salons took place during the height of the revolution, when ideas were, buzzing around, and people of all classes and all levels wanted to discuss the things that were relevant to the revolution and society they were in. So the idea of the salon is, from the Enlightenment, is what we kind of keep hold of. We like the idea of developing the idea of the Enlightenment, but obviously we're not an aristocratic forum, we're a public forum, and what we want to attract is a public audience to discuss, all and any ideas, really.
Yeah, exactly. And I noticed, I read a couple of the articles on your website, and there was a bit of back and forth about the kind of no platforming idea. How do you feel about that?
Well, we're for free speech, and the only I've written quite a lot over the years for Culture Vulture, which obviously you'll know, and the only thing I ever write about as co-founder of the Salon or Salon organizer is free speech issues, because that's the only thing that the Salon stands for. It doesn't stand for anything else. It's not pro-Brexit or anti-Brexit or pro-environmentalist or anti-environmentalist. But the issue of free speech, the Salon is a forum where free speech takes place. So I felt, because of that, I've felt the necessity to defend free speech when it's been under attack in one way or another in Leeds. And that's happened when the council have banned meetings that have taken place. And for whatever reason, I can understand people might be uncomfortable with topics, but, it's public property, and you've had councillors acting in a very undemocratic way to shut down debates that people have certainly wanted to take place. So I'm against no platforming. I'm against cancel culture, and and against censorship in general, really.
Yeah, I suppose in your role, you'd have to be, wouldn't you?
Yeah, because it would be self-defeating otherwise to be a public discussion forum, but to say, oh no, we could never discuss that, or we could never have that kind of debate out, would be, well, it would be a contradiction. There's obviously things, you don't need to discuss everything, because being anti-no platform doesn't mean that people have a right to a platform, or any debate has a right to be aired. But we'll air whatever debates we want to air in that way, and I'll defend other people's right to air whatever debates they want to air.
And so I mean, it's obviously it's really important culturally, isn't it, to be able to have these spaces, and also if you've not been the kind of, if you haven't had any kind of further education or anything like that, and I think it's just a great way to sort of go and get knowledge, and it seems like a completely different cultural thing than going to see a film, for example, or going to the theatre. I think it's a great thing that you're out there doing it.
I think it's an adjunct to things like the theatre and arts and other cultural things. I think it's also, when we started, what we had to do is we had to look out and try and find an audience to bring in. And what we didn't know, and what other people often don't know, even now, is how rich Leeds was as a discussion scene. And that's something I've written about on Culture Vulture as well. I've described Leeds as a city of debate. I kind of coined that term, and slightly provocatively to kind of goad other cities to respond. And I did get a bit of a response from philosophy and pubs in Liverpool, because in Leeds you've got two Café Scientifiques. Café Scientifique was founded in Leeds by Duncan Dallas in the 1990s, and that exists all over the world. You've got Café Psychologique, again founded in Leeds, inspired by Café Scientifique. You've had Taking Soundings, Skeptics in the Pub, Philosophy in Pub exists, and it's gone up, and Café Économique is another one. And it's gone up and down over the years. At times there's like a dozen for it, at times there's half a dozen. But it's been a really, really healthy scene in Leeds. And I think a lot of them emerged just prior to or around the time we did. And I think that's quite important. I think it reflects the fact that in some ways debate is being closed down in other places. University itself has long ceased to take open debate and freedom of speech seriously, and debate has moved elsewhere. And I think there's a hankering after a good discussion about all sorts of things, whether it's science, politics, or culture. And like you say, to have that slightly different experience than going to the theatre, although it's, like I say, it can be connected to other arts, to sit down and just, I go to Café Scientifique and often don't say anything. It'll be a topic, and I think, well, I'll just learn about that topic. But to participate as well is a good thing to do.
And do you think there is sort of an element of performance? Because, I mean, at university, the lecturers that you get, I mean, some of them are brilliant and some can be, not exactly great at delivering even interesting information. Do you find that makes a huge difference to the people who speak?
I think, yes, it does. That's really important. I just chair it, so I just say who's got a question and take people's hands. But you notice it when you have somebody who is a very good performer. We have some people who we have on, like the first Salon back after lockdown in October. We had a lecturer from York St John University called Nikos Sotirakopoulos, and people will turn up just to see Nikos. He's so dynamic and he's such an entertaining speaker. But most of our speakers are reasonably entertaining. Some salons fall flat. Some salons are duller than others. It's the nature of the beast. Some people are less dynamic speakers than others. But you can have different types of debate with different types of speaker and different sizes of audience. For instance, you always want a large audience because we need to pay our way. We need to pay for the room and speakers' costs and everything else. And also you want people to come in and think, oh, there must be something happening here. But if you have a small audience, you have a slightly different debate. So you can have a large audience and then you can have not many hands going up because people are nervous amongst a large audience to ask a question. And then you have a small audience and you have a more dynamic debate because people feel more emboldened and it's more chatty and conversationally. So it's not just a matter of how dynamic the speaker is, it's how dynamic the audience is as well. It's feeds off each other.
Yeah, because it's a two-way conversation, isn't it? Yeah, Where I can see that. And what have you got coming up, Paul?
Well, we've just done the first two since lockdown, and I'm not planning on doing another one until March, because what we normally do between January and March is annual, and we've ran this for 9 years now. We run an annual years 10 and 11 school debating competition for 14 to 16-year-olds. Obviously, it didn't take place last January this year, and the previous January we ran the qualifying rounds, but then the final had to be cancelled because of COVID, and that was it. So that didn't take place. So I'm just getting all the qualifying rounds in place for January, and now I'm partly regretting it already because I'm thinking, I'm sure this is going to be kiboshed. I'm sure this is not going to go ahead. So we've got 2 out of 3 qualifying rounds set, and then if it comes off, we've got the final at the Thackeray Museum in March. So I'm just waiting for the final qualifying round to be put in place, but then I'm waiting to see what happens with the schools
Yeah, of course. It's
and whether it happens.
such a terrible time for everything. I feel like, I've only just dropped the coronavirus extraordinary episodes title. I feel like it's far too premature. But anyway, and can people go and see that final at Thackeray Medical Museum?
People can, yeah, if they let us know. I mean, we've had in the past with the final. Obviously, you get the schools in the final, and the kids who aren't taking part as part of the audience and teachers and stuff. Ordinary members of the public can, and they just have to let us know. Sometimes we get parents coming along, so we just need to know to let the organisers know that so many people are going to be turning up, and this is their names and everything else.
And so, do you do any sort of instruction on debating in the schools, or are you working with schools that already have some kind of a debating society?
Both. I do training if schools want training. I've in fact, it was being involved in school debating that partly inspired the Salon. I've been involved in national school debating events since 2008, and the Salon started in 2009. And I've helped run rounds and competitions in India, Israel, Germany, as well as without the UK. But when the Headingley Festival of Ideas started, which is now sadly no more, when that started about 9 years ago, they approached us to run a school debating competition for them as part of that festival.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas most of the stuff I've done has been with sixth forms, I said, let's try the 2 years younger. Let's try the years 10, 11 years. And it's been brilliant. It's been the most rewarding thing I think I've ever done in my life. It's been fantastic. And I also run other one-off competitions. I've run them between Leeds City College and Leeds College of Building, and one-off events in schools and things like this. But yes, I do. If schools want it, I'll do a training session, which is just an hour, which is just 15 minutes intro to it, and then 45 minutes practice debate. I mean, a lot of schools we deal with, we generally just deal with, ordinary comprehensive schools. A lot of them don't have a history of school debate. Some of them, this is the only thing the only school debating they do is the school debating that we organise for them. But some of them do have a lengthy history and take part in lots of other school debating competitions as well. So
And
it's a mixture.
Is it something that you did when you were at school, Paul?
No, it didn't exist in our school. It wasn't something we did in school. I don't think in those days, I certainly would have been up for it. I wouldn't have had the confidence and everything else. I wasn't a particularly bright kid at school, but no, it's not something that took place in our school. It's something that has obviously always existed since about the 1900s. There's two main competitions that have been going since about, 1910 or 1905, which have always been run amongst private schools and grammar schools. And the format we use is one called the Debating Matters format. And I've worked voluntarily with Debating Matters. And when Debating Matters was founded, which was about, 15 years ago or more, that aimed at comprehensive schools because, they're the ones that haven't been doing this. Although it has all schools in it, it has private, it has grammar. And in the sixth form competitions I've run, I used to run one in Wakefield for Jordan Solicitors for a while. We used to have a private school, we used to have grammar school, as well as the comps, and we mix them all up, in them, which is good to see how that goes. But generally, we're aiming at comprehensive school kids, or whatever comprehensive is called nowadays. They're all called different things, aren't they? Academies and everything else.
So, what do you think students gain from getting involved in debating?
I think that with the competition, one of the things is we don't tell young people what to think. We simply tell them to think. And that's the basic premise. We show them that there's always more than one side to an argument. And that's really important, especially nowadays. We try and encourage them to not be afraid to put forward the most radical or contentious arguments for their side of the debate, um, and to importantly not just think of the great ideas that they want to put across, but to listen as well. That's the really important thing, and it's something that you see a problem with in debate, like online debate, Twitter debates, live debates like Politics Live or Question Time, where people put points and the opponents don't listen to what they say. So people may make a general statement and people react as if they've made an absolute statement. So if I said something like, uh, cancer is generally a disease of old age, you might come back and say, I know somebody who died of cancer at 21. You think, yeah, that's not the point. The point is, I'm saying it generally. And it's that listening to what the opponent said and responding to what they've said, not what you think they've said, not what you've wanted them to say, and everything else. I think the listening is more difficult to teach and more difficult to get through than the speaking. Obviously, if they want to take part in a school debating competition, they're up for speaking, they're up for pontificating and putting forward the ideas. Even though they may have to be devil's advocate, they may have the opposite side to what they actually believe in. But it's always the emphasis on listening, because we have a team of judges that question the teams and then come back with critical feedback, and it's always the listening thing that always has to be emphasized.
Yeah, but I mean, I imagine just all age groups, would perhaps struggle with that. And like you say, especially nowadays, especially with the form of debates that we kind of see, and politicians getting asked questions and then just never answering them.
Yeah.
But do I mean, they must get a great lot out of it, and also, how difficult do they find it to argue the opposite point sometimes?
I don't think they find it particularly difficult to argue the opposite point. I think I'd always prefer to argue the opposite point. I think if I was arguing from my own side, I think I'd be afraid I'd find it too precious.
Right.
If you said something like, "Oh, right, you've got the side of the debate to argue for free speech," I'd think, "Oh my God, will I do this justice?" Whereas if you said to me, "You've got to argue for censorship or against free speech," I think I'd slightly enjoy that more. I don't think it's whether they have the side that they agree with or not. It depends on how much work they've put in, whether they've put the work in. They do fantastically well. For instance, we have the qualifying rounds, then we have the final. Obviously, when you have the qualifying rounds, you'll have a combination of some completely new schools to it and some completely new pupils from existing schools. Obviously, it's years 10 and 11, so people might take part for 2 years on a run. So they might be up to speed and they might be brilliant from the off.
Yeah.
They might be brilliant from the off anyway. But there's a learning curve, and there's a learning curve within the schools as well. The schools need to develop a culture of debate if they want to kind of get on. And so you get a new cohort that comes in and kind of picks things up and realise how they go on. So what happens is when you have the qualifying rounds, they're often very mixed. But when you get to the final, I've had debates at the final with 14, 15-year-olds that have been as good as debates I've seen amongst sixth formers.
Really?
And suddenly it jumps up. They realise what's wanted, which is just a lot of hard work, really, and getting their heads around not just their own ideas, not just the good ideas that they want to put across, but picking up on the possible opposition ideas, what might be said to them and what replies you can come up to that.
Yeah, of course. So I suppose in so many ways it gives every subject that's debated, it gives the person participating a really rounded idea of all of the issues.
Yeah, it does. It should. I mean, by the time you've had a debate, you should have had most of the main arguments out on any issue. There might be subtle little nuances that aren't there, but that's fine. Because they don't get all the time in the world. You have 2 teams of 2, so that's 4 debaters in a debate. Everybody gets 3 minutes to put their opening statements for and against, and then they get questioned by the judges, they get questioned by the audience, they question each other. they sum up at the end. So you want to see that they've brought out most of the debates that you would hear, that you would see in the papers. That we give them readings and everything else which come from the papers,
Yeah.
articles and things. So we want to see the main debates come out. So yeah, by the end of the debate, they should have heard all the main arguments for and against any particular topic.
Sounds absolutely fascinating. I bet it's a great thing to be involved in.
It is, and it's good. Like I say, we have a team of judges, so it's hard work. It's hard work for the pupils. It's hard work for the judges as well, because the judges have to gen up on all this stuff.
Yeah.
And they might have to have questions ready, or generally they take questions from what the pupils have said there and then. They have to think fast on the feet. They have to give critical feedback at the end, say what they did well, what they did poorly, how they could have improved. And then they have to go away and decide who they thought best defended their side of the motion. So it's hard work all round. And it creates a dialogue between young people and adults on an adult topic in which we treat them like adults, and they do get, proper criticism. Like, judges might say, you clearly hadn't done enough work. They asked you, the opposition asked you a question and you didn't have a reply to that. And you really should have had a reply to that. So and of course we give them the praise as well, where it's due. But it's a proper intellectual workout for all concerned.
It's mad, isn't it? Because you'd imagine that because debating societies, you think of them as part of sort of private schools rather than sort of secondary comprehensives. You'd imagine that politicians, seeing as most of them come from that life, would be better at debating things than they actually are.
Well, sometimes they're just better at rhetoric, aren't they? I mean, they're good at, like you intimated before about politicians, they can be good at avoiding the debates. Maybe sometimes they've had it too comfortably. Maybe they think they kind of rule the roost. It's interesting, particularly. I mean, grammar schools often do well. Understandably, you've got the brightest middle class kids, and also amongst the brightest working class kids who get into grammar schools. But private schools are a mixed bag. Just because you pay money to go to a school doesn't tell you that the school's any good. No. So you get an interesting mix from private schools where they surprisingly don't do always very well compared to the brightest comprehensive school kids and the brightest grammar school kids. So that's quite interesting to see.
I bet it is, yeah. I can detect from your accent, Paul, that you haven't lived in Leeds your entire life.
No, I moved. I moved 25 years ago. No, 35 years ago when I was 23.
Wow, so you've definitely lived here long enough to answer the three questions.
Oh yeah, I have, yeah.
The first one being, what would you say is great about the city of Leeds?
I just think Leeds is a bright, airy, open city. That's one of the things. I think it's very cosmopolitan, both in its physical look and also in its range of restaurants and things like that, and the range of cultural offerings. It's very cosmopolitan. Mm-hmm. But I think the bright and airiness is quite important because, Manchester is really grim up north. It's grey and dull. Leeds, I've always felt it's not a massive city. It's big enough, and you can walk around it quite easy and everything else. But it always feels a bit sunnier this side of the Pennines, and a bit brighter, and it's great connections for everywhere else. So I think it's good located, and it's bright and airy and cosmopolitan.
Good answers. And if you had to choose something that you thought was not so great about the city, what would you go for?
I can't think of anything really.
That's a good answer, Paul. And if somebody was a long-term resident of Leeds, would you be able to tell them about something that you would consider to be a hidden gem that they might never have heard of?
If they're a long-term resident, they should have heard of it, but they might not have. My hidden little gem is the Grove pub.
Oh, yeah.
I actually live 2 minutes from the Grove because I live in Holbeck, and I didn't move here to be near there. When me and a partner over a decade ago split up, I ended up in the city centre to be near work. But I love the Grove. I'm an old rocker at heart, and it's an old rock pub, and the Grove is my little gem of Leeds.
Yeah, it's a fantastic place. It's sort of tucked behind Bridgewater Place, isn't it?
Yeah, the horrible looking Bridgewater Place. Apparently, when they built that, I believe they wanted to knock the Grove down. So I think
Yeah,
they've got.
I heard about that, and I think there was a big uproar because I think a legend says that it's got the longest running folk song. I'm not sure if it's in the world, but it's in England.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of that.
Yeah, apparently
All right.
that's the case. Yeah.
All right.
Um, and what will you be doing with the rest of your evening, Paul?
Uh, I think, well, as I'm still just recovering from COVID, I'm just going to sit in and I'll probably watch a film on Amazon or something. I'll probably catch up on Politics Live. I always watch that every night with Joe Cofe. It's on BBC Two. I always enjoy that. It's usually
Yeah,
quite lively. So I get me fix of politics and me fill.
I'm sure there'll be a
And
lot discussed today.
I'd normally kind of read something, but I'm bunged up. I can't read anything at the moment. So I'll just watch a crap film on Amazon.
That sounds like a good idea. Thank you so very much for coming along to speak to me. And I will put all of your links in the podcast notes so that people can find out what's going on and how to get involved.
Well, thank you very much, Hazel. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. Have a good evening. I hope you get better soon.
Okay, cheers. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.
I had a really interesting time chatting to Paul. Please do check out all of the links in the podcast notes so you can find out more and get involved should you wish to. The track featured on this episode is The Boor by the brilliant Priest of Beards. Have a listen and see what you think. Speak soon. Bye bye.
What's happening in this great city? Light on Leeds, we'll tell you. But wait a minute. Light on Leeds. Light on Leeds. Light on Leeds.